Alright, Shalom Yasha'Allah. Back with another GMS on the go. This is the Raleigh, North Carolina camp. I'm Brother Nakam.
Brother Shawai.
And before we go any further, we like to give all honor, all glory, and all praises to the Heavenly Father, His only begotten Son, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakar, Kodash. Next up, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who teach us the truth according to the Bible, and who rule well, and a double shalom to all the Se'akim throughout the four corners of the earth, pushing the truth and righteousness and sincerity to the best of your ability. And me and the brothers going to get into a lesson, and the name of this lesson is going to be Israel is a Holy People, which consists of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who are the real biblical Hebrew Israelites. Say that again. Israel is a holy people, which consists of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who are the real biblical Hebrew Israelites. So without further ado, we'll grab our first precept, Deuteronomy 7:6.
Alright, this is Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power.
Right. Talking about you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. Again, who are the real biblical Hebrew Israelites. You see, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, y'all are a holy people. And that word holy means separate. You see, so you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, you're supposed to be a separate people unto Yahweh, Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls God and Jesus, who's a so-called black man. Meaning what? You're supposed to be separate from Esau, the so-called white man. You're supposed to be separate from Ham, the so-called Deuterian Africans. You're supposed to be separate from Ishmael, the so-called musty Arabs. You're supposed to be separate from Elam, the so-called Dahese Indians. And you're supposed to be separate from Moab and Ammon, the so-called Chinese and Japanese. So read that from the top again, Baba Kashan.
This is Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power. The Lord thy power hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself.
Right, so Yahweh, who the word calls God, who's so-called black man, have chosen you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans to be a special people unto himself. And real quick, before we go any further, we're just going to prove that Yahweh chose Israel, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. So hold that. Get Isaiah 41, verse 8.
Right, this is Isaiah chapter 41, verse 8. But thou, Israel,
you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans,
art my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my family, my friends, like it.
God. It said, Jacob, whom I have chosen. You see? And when you read the scriptures, it tells you that what? Jacob, one of our forefathers, name was changed to Israel after he wrestled the angel. And you can read about that in Genesis. So Israel, which consists of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, you are Yahweh, Yahweh Shai's chosen. So get ahead and go back to Deuteronomy 76.
This is Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power. The Lord thy power hath chosen thee to be a special people unto him.
Read that again.
The Lord thy power hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself.
There you go, kind. So right, so Yahweh, Yahweh Shai, chosen you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans to be a special people unto himself. And we're going to get that definition real quick on special.
This is the definition of special, an adjective, better.
Right. So you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, you're a better people than all these other nations that are upon the face of the earth. You see? You so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, you're better at everything that you do than all these other nations that are upon the face of the earth. You see? you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're better at working than these other nations. You're better at acting than these other nations. You're better at singing and rapping than these other nations. You're better at dressing than these other nations. You're better at in looks in these other nations. What else? You're better at
You said sports.
Yeah, kind. But we can say that again. You're better at sports than these other nations.
You cooking?
Better at cooking the water, bro. You better at cooking than these other nations. You so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're better than these other nations at everything you do. You seen this ultimate because you got the spirit and power of Yahweh Shai in you. And that's what makes you better than these other nations.
Greater.
Right. You so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you are a greater people than these other nations that are upon the face of the earth.
Or otherwise different from what is usual.
Right. And you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you are definitely different from these other nations. You see? And these are just some of the definitions that goes back to special. You see, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're that special people that Yahweh Shai has chosen to be unto themselves. So go ahead and go back to the blue letter. Read from top again.
It's Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 6. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power. The Lord thy power the Lord thy power have chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth.
Under all people that are upon the face of the earth.
Above all people that are upon the face of the earth.
Equal to all people that are upon the face of the earth.
Above all people that are upon the face of the earth.
Right, so Yahweh Shai chosen you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, they would be above all people, all the other nations that are upon the face of the earth. Meaning what? He chosen you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, they be above Esau, the so-called white man. They be above Ham, the so-called Judean Africans. They be above Ishmael, the so-called Mustard Arabs. They be above Elam, the so-called Daes Indians. And they be above Moab and Ammon, the so-called Chinese and Japanese. You see, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and the Americans, you were created to be above all these other nations. So get my last precept, give me Deuteronomy 14 and 2. And then we'll close out on that.
This is Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 2.
Right, and this is just backing up Deuteronomy 7 and 6, what we just read.
For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power.
Right, so again, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and the Americans, who are the real biblical Hebrew Israelites, y'all are a holy people. And again, that word holy means separate. So you so-called Negroes, Latino, and the Americans, you're supposed to be a separate people unto Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls God and Jesus, who so-called black men. Meaning what? You're supposed to be separate from all these other nations that are upon the face of the earth. Esau, the so-called white man. Ham, the so-called Judean Africans. Moab and Ammon, the so-called Chinese and Japanese. Ishmael, the so-called Mustard Arabs. And Elam, the so-called Daes Indians. And anybody else I left out. Read that from the top again.
This is Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 2. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power. And the Lord hath chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself.
Right. And we already proved in Isaiah 41 and 8 that Yahweh have chosen you so-called Negroes, Latino, and the Americans. You see? So Yahweh chosen you so-called Negroes, Latino, and the Americans to be a peculiar people unto himself. And now we're about to look at the definition of peculiar. Salakia Israel. There it is. The first one, I think. Yep.
Definition of peculiar: strange or odd.
Right. it said the definition of peculiar, it says strange or odd. So you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you are definitely looked at as a strange people to these other nations. You see? And it's ultimately because what? Again, you got the spirit and power of Yahweh Shai in you. And that's what makes you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans strange to these other nations, to these other people. You see, because what? They can't figure out how we move the way we move and how we do the things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
You see, because what? They see LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Kevin Durant, who else?
Steph Curry.
Stephen Curry, James Harden.
Mm-hmm.
Name somebody else.
Paul George, Cam Newton.
Kind.
Football, any sport.
Any sport. They see, they see them crossing up the ball, going behind their back with the ball and all that stuff. Gliding from the free throw line, doing alley hoops and windmills, and that's strange to them. You see, like the brother said, you see Cam Newton, LaDainian Tomlinson, Randy Moss, Chad Johnson,
Jerry Rice,
the water bro,
Walker,
kind.
All the legends.
You see all these people, catching passes with one hand, diving into the end zone.
Odell
Beckham, kind. You see all these people doing spin moves and juke moves, stiff arms, and that's strange to them because we doing things that they can never do. You see, they see how we still standing after 400 years of slavery, and that's strange to them. You see, so you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're that peculiar people that Yahweh Shai has chosen to himself. Next definition.
Unusual.
Right. You so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans. You're unusual people.
Particular. Yeah, and special.
And special. Let's see some synonyms real quick.
There you go.
More. There we go.
Oh, shoot.
Just name a couple of them. We ain't got to go through all of them.
Okay. Exceptional. Rare. Extraordinary. Remarkable. Puzzling. Mystifying. Mysterious. Perplexing. Baffling. Unaccountable. Oh no, I said that. I'm gonna just skip that one. Uncommon.
Yeah, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans. You're uncommon people to these other nations.
Irregular. Singular. And just going to deviant. Aberrant.
That's good. We get the point. We get the point. So basically, again, you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans, you're that peculiar people that Yahweh Shai has chosen to be unto themselves. You see, and these are just some of the definitions that go back to peculiar. So go ahead and go back to Blue Letter.
Okay.
Read it from the top again.
This is Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 2. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power, and the Lord hath chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself above all nations that are upon the earth.
Under all nations that are upon the face of the earth.
Above all the nations that are upon the earth.
Equal to all nations upon the face of the earth.
Above all the nations that are upon the earth.
Right, so Yahweh chosen you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans to be above all nations that are upon the face of the earth. Again, meaning what? He chosen you so-called Negroes, Latino, and Americans to be above Esau, the so-called white man, to be above Ham, the so-called Deuterian Africans, to be above Ishmael, the so-called Musty Arabs, to be above Elam, the so-called Dot-Head East Indians, and to be above Moab and Ammon, the so-called Chinese and Japanese, and anybody else I left out. You see, so you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Americans, y'all are a holy people unto Yahweh Shai. And again, that word holy means separate. So you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Americans, you're supposed to be a separate people unto Yahweh Shai. Meaning you're supposed to be separate from the other nations. So with that, I hope you've been edified. This has been another GMS on the go. This is the Raleigh, North Carolina camp. Before we go any further, we like to give all honor, all glory, and all praises to the Heavenly Father and His only begotten Son, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakar Kodash. Next up, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone from teaching us this truth according to the Bible, who rule well, and a double shalom to all the sincere occupants throughout the four corners of the earth, pushing this truth in righteousness and sincerity to the best ability. Till next time, we say shalom.
Shalom.